Why aren't you speaking to me? I asked, confused by the sudden silence. I've decided not to engage with strangers, came the cold reply. I nodded, accepting the situation, and started to leave. Living at my husband's parents' house had been harder than I expected. While I anticipated some friction with my mother-in-law, the chill from my father-in-law came as a surprise. Things only became more complicated when my sister-in-law, who had never liked me, moved back in. What was once a peaceful home became tense and uncomfortable. I gathered my things, muttering, "Don't think I'll regret leaving," and left without a second glance. Just 2 days later, chaos ensued at their home. My husband and I first met at work. He was a sales rep who often came to my office. Over time, I grew drawn to his kindness and charm. While he wasn't traditionally handsome, his personality captivated me. It didn't take long before we began dating. He opened up about his stable family life with loving parents and a sister. My background couldn't have been more different. I had lost my parents young and was raised in an orphanage, a topic I found difficult to discuss, but he listened without judgment and promised to stand by me. Soon after, he proposed, and we began planning our future together. When I met his parents and shared my past, they were supportive, brushing off any concerns about it affecting our marriage. This made me feel accepted, though my sister-in-law's reaction was far from warm. At the time, I chalked up her unease to the usual adjustments of a new relationship. As our wedding neared, we debated living with his parents. Ultimately, I chose to keep my job while he prepared for his upcoming transfer. Though I briefly considered leaving my job to join him, my career was progressing well, and I had recently taken on more responsibility. We agreed that he would move on his own. After the wedding, I relished the idea of our newlywed days, even planning visits to ensure we had quality time together. Moving in with his parents right after marrying felt overwhelming, but my husband seemed more comfortable with the arrangement, possibly to ease his mother's concerns. Given my own early loss, being part of a family felt appealing, and I had grown fond of my in-laws. Still, balancing work and family life was no easy task, and things took an unexpected turn when I found myself in the middle of a delicate situation. One day, while my bossy and anxious mother-in-law was out shopping, I was preparing to clean the house on my day off. My father-in-law, looking more frazzled than usual, pulled me aside. "Is something wrong?" I asked, sensing his discomfort. After a long hesitation, he confided in me. "I need to take some time off work," he explained, citing stress and health issues. He was worried about my mother-in-law's reaction. She was loving but prone to anxiety and had been critical when he took a sick day before. His weight had dropped noticeably, and though he needed rest, he feared how she would react, especially since they relied on his overtime pay. Reluctantly, he revealed he had been seeing a doctor secretly and was now in need of a break, but didn't know how to tell her. "If I tell her, she might leave me," he said, his voice filled with distress. I felt a strong urge to help him. My in-laws had welcomed me despite my difficult past, and I wanted to repay their kindness. "Don't worry," I reassured him. "I'll send you money each month to help with expenses. Take care of yourself, and get better soon." "Thank you," he said, visibly relieved but burdened by the secret he still had to carry. I transferred the money to his account discreetly, and while my mother-in-law never checked her bank statements, he continued to pretend he was going to work. Instead, he sought solace in a mental health clinic and long walks in the mountains. Gradually, his health and spirits improved, and he seemed on the road to recovery. However, things took a turn when my sister-in-law returned home after a fight with her husband. "It feels so good to be back," she said with relief, venting about her marriage. "I can't stand being with him anymore. I'll be staying here for a while, so you'll have to cook for me too." From the very first family gathering, it was clear she held a grudge against me. At her wedding, she had barely hidden her distaste and later criticized my appearance, suggesting her brother could have married someone more attractive. She also mocked my upbringing, calling it an embarrassment. At first, I thought her return was temporary, but her stay stretched on, and her bitterness grew. Despite my mother-in-law's usual kindness, I believed she would defend me against her daughter's harsh remarks, but I was wrong. One day, after returning from work, I sensed something had shifted. My mother-in-law seemed distant and cold. When I asked her if something was wrong, she accused me of talking behind her back. "I've never said anything bad about you," I replied, hurt and confused. "Why would I? You've always been kind to me." She left the room abruptly, and I found myself face to face with my smirking sister-in-law in the hallway. "Looks like you're out of favor," she taunted. "Did your true colors finally show? Being from an orphanage, you know it matters, right? Maybe you should stop gossiping about people." "I haven't said anything like that," I protested, still shocked. "Well, the neighbors said you've been talking about her behind her back," my sister-in-law added, her vague accusation hanging in the air. "It's best you keep your mouth shut." "I didn't say anything of the sort," I countered, but she ignored me. "Oh, how disrespectful. She's calling me a liar," she declared, twisting my words as she retreated to my mother-in-law's room. From then on, my sister-in-law's behavior escalated. She fabricated complaints about my treatment of her, claiming I'd made her sleep in the hallway or insisted on taking the last turn in the bath because she was just a guest. Each time, I found myself defending my actions, trying to clear up misunderstandings in a home that had once felt like a fresh start. As her stay continued, I began to feel like a stranger in my own home. My mother-in-law, once warm and welcoming, was increasingly influenced by my sister-in-law's manipulation, and things only became colder. One evening, I came home to find my in-laws eating sushi together, completely ignoring me. "Oh, look who's here," my sister-in-law said, smirking. "I'm sure you weren't planning on joining us." My mother-in-law didn't even glance up from the TV. "If you wanted sushi, you should have told me," I said, trying to hide my hurt. "No one mentioned it," my sister-in-law snapped, then cheerfully added to my in-laws, "I brought some pudding from my friends, let's have it together." They all indulged in the dessert, while I stood there, feeling invisible. Exhausted from work and the emotional toll, I retreated to my room, too drained to argue. The next day, when my sister-in-law asked for a ride to the station, I finally had enough. "I can't, I have work," I said. "We're not even going in the same direction, and you want to leave around noon. Just take the day off," she insisted. "Can't you be nicer? I haven't had time to relax since I got married." I stood my ground. "You went out with friends last night. I have work, please take the bus." The tension in the house was palpable. I couldn't help but wonder if my sister-in-law planned to stay permanently. Each day felt colder, and my home, once filled with warmth and hope, now felt like a battleground. I stood my ground, feeling the weight of my mother-in-law and sister-in-law's whispered conversation as I prepared to leave for work. The tension was palpable, but I tried to push it aside, determined not to let the situation escalate any further. However, that evening, the breaking point arrived. Work had kept me late, and by the time I got home, I was soaked from the rain, carrying groceries in one hand and bracing for another round of cold treatment. As I entered the house, it was exactly as I feared: no greeting, no acknowledgement. They were eating dinner, just as they had every other night, continuing their silent exclusion. But what I found in the courtyard was beyond anything I had imagined. There, illuminated under the dim porch light, was a pile of my belongings: my designer bag, a symbol of my first paycheck, shoes my husband had given me as a birthday gift, even my work computer, all drenched in rain. Standing beside them was my sister-in-law, a malicious smirk playing on her face. "Having someone else's things in the house is disgusting," she sneered. "Throwing around a designer bag like that, how arrogant of you." I was speechless. I turned to my mother-in-law and father-in-law, searching for some sign of support, but neither said a word. "Why didn't you stop her? Why haven't you said anything? Do you believe the lies she's been spreading about me? Aren't you upset by what she did?" I pleaded, desperately seeking any semblance of solidarity. My mother-in-law avoided my gaze, silence hanging heavily in the air, before she finally muttered, "I can't talk to strangers. I can't be friendly with someone who's not family." My heart sank. "Where's my father-in-law?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He was the one I had supported financially during his time off, the one who had seemed to appreciate my efforts. But when the moment came, he walked past me without a word and retreated to his room, leaving me in a state of profound confusion. "That's it, then," I whispered to myself, a mixture of resignation and determination settling in. My sister-in-law, sensing my distress, pounced with venomous words. "Oh, are you upset? Good riddance. Honestly, I never liked you from the start, coming from an institution and all. Just don't regret leaving, all right?" I didn't flinch. The decision was clear, I replied, my voice steady despite the storm inside. I quickly packed my things, aware that my father-in-law might worry about losing my financial support but had done nothing to stop me or defend me. His silence was the final blow. There was no point in waiting for him to act. I couldn't even bring myself to tell my husband, as I suspected he hadn't been informed of my sister-in-law's return or the turmoil that followed. If he had known, surely he would have reached out, but no word came, and I feared that maybe he, too, had been influenced by his family's narrative. With a heavy heart, I got into my car and drove straight to my husband's new job location, far from the toxic environment I was leaving behind. Doubts clouded my mind as I questioned his loyalty and whether our future together was worth it. Perhaps, I thought, divorce might be the only way forward. When I arrived at his apartment, he wasn't home yet, likely held up by work. As I waited, the lights flickered on, and soon my husband walked in, surprised and delighted to see me. "What? You're here? You should have told me. I would have come back sooner." "What a nice surprise." His face lit up with genuine joy, a stark contrast to the coldness I had left behind. A wave of relief and humiliation swept over me, and tears filled my eyes. "What's wrong?" he asked, concern filling his voice. "Did I do something? What's going on?" Taking a deep breath, I explained everything: how I had supported his father during his time off, how his sister had returned and manipulated his mother into turning against me, and how the situation had escalated to the point where my belongings had been discarded in the rain. With tears in my eyes, I shared the pain and betrayal I had been feeling. My husband listened intently, his face darkening as he absorbed everything. "I'm so sorry," he said. "I had no idea how bad it had gotten. I was so caught up in work that I missed all the signs." He looked at me with regret and compassion. "You don't ever have to go back to that house again. If you don't want to, I'll stand by you. I promise." The relief was immense. For the first time in a long while, I felt a glimmer of hope. He assured me that he would sever ties with his parents and sister, and that he would stop all financial support to his father. The weight I had been carrying for so long finally began to lift. That night, we slept soundly, wrapped in each other's arms. After leaving my in-laws' house, I never returned, though commuting to my husband's new location was difficult. I had arranged with my company to work remotely. My job didn't require me to be in the office every day, and with the flexibility of working from home, I was able to settle into a new routine. As we began to build our life together, it felt like a fresh start, finally free from the toxicity of my in-laws' home. Then, unexpectedly, my sister-in-law reached out. She was furious after discovering I had been financially supporting the family during my father-in-law's medical leave. "Why didn't you tell me you were covering the expenses?" she demanded. "He asked me not to," I responded calmly. "I respected his wishes." "Well, the money's running out," she continued, desperation in her voice. "The place is a mess, and no one's doing anything around here. As his wife, you need to come back and take care of things." "Why should I help people who treated me like this?" I replied, reflecting her words back to her. "Aren't you his wife? You should be handling this, not me." I hung up, ignoring her subsequent calls and messages. The days of guilt and manipulation were over. Despite her continued attempts to reach me, I remained firm. When my husband found out, he immediately addressed the situation with the same resolve. "I'll never forgive how you treated her. Leave my wife alone, or you'll regret it," he told them. A few days later, my father-in-law called, his voice desperate. He begged me to resume financial support, explaining how difficult things had become. But the truth was clear: I owed them nothing. "I won't help you again," I said, ending the call firmly. In an act of last-ditch desperation, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law showed up at my workplace, causing a scene and demanding that I send money. My company was prepared for this, and security swiftly intervened. When my husband heard about it, he was furious and urged me to report them. My colleagues were incredibly supportive, encouraging me to focus on my work and my life with my husband, free from the chaos of my in-laws. As the months passed, my father-in-law's health deteriorated due to the stress caused by my mother-in-law and sister-in-law. He was forced to quit his job, and my sister-in-law's return to her husband was rejected, leading to their divorce. The town soon learned of her disruptive behavior, further damaging her reputation. Meanwhile, my in-laws moved to a modest apartment, relying on part-time work to make ends meet. My husband and I, on the other hand, found peace at last. Our home became a sanctuary, and recently, we received joyous news: we're expecting a baby. The excitement of this new chapter fills us with hope and gratitude, and we are cherishing every moment as we prepare for our growing family.